Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelek Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Tzitzis, and we'll be learning today Mirz Hashem Daf Yud Daled Amud Beis. We pick up on Yud Daled Amud Aleph Siman Ches Sif Tes. Says the Mechaber, Kaidem sheyavarech, before you recite the bracha on tzitzits, ya'ayin bechutei hatzitziyos, you should check the strings of the tzitzits, imhem kesherim, to see that they are intact and they are kosher. Why, says the Mechaber, why is it critical to do this? Kedei shelo yavarech levatola, so that when we make the bracha on tzitzits, we should not make a bracha levatola. Now this is very, very interesting. When we have a question whether or not the tzitzits are kosher, the Mechaber is suggesting that when we go to put on the tzitzits, we have to check that the tzitzits are in good shape and that they're kosher. Well, what are the problems if they're not kosher? L'chara, we have two problems if the tzitzits are not kosher. One is you're putting on a beged of daled kanfais and they are not misukin with tzitzits. They don't have proper tzitzits attached to them. Now, to wear a talis cotton, to wear a beged of daled kanfais without tzitzits would be to be mavatal an asay. You're not transgressing an Isser Lav. There is no mitzvah lois asay in the Torah that says that you may not wear a beged of daled kanfas without tzitzits. It's a mitzvah asay. If you're wearing a beged of daled kanfas, you must affix tzitzits to the beged of daled kanfas. So if you wear a beged of daled kanfas without tzitzits, you're being mavatal an asay. So there you have one problem. If you wear a beged of daled kanfas without tzitzits, you're being mavatal an mitzvah asay. Another problem is, if you're going to put on a beged of daled kanfas that you believe are properly affixed with tzitzis, and now you're going to make a bracha on the kiyum asay, well, if in fact the tzitzis are not kosher at tzitzis, then you have uttered a bracha levatala. Now, a bracha levatala is a very serious affair. Leisis Hashem alikecha lashav, you're mentioning Hashem's name in the bracha. A bracha levatala is very serious. Now, the Mechaber picks over here on only one of the problems. He says, before you put on the tzitzits, before you put on, let's say, a talis cotton or a talis, make sure to check the tzitzits to see to it that they're kosher, because if they're not kosher and you make a bracha, it would be making a bracha levatala. But he does not say anything about the question of the bittul asay. He doesn't mention the issue of what happens if you put on the beged of daled kanfas and they don't have proper tzitzits on them, and now l'chayra you are being mavatal a mitzvah asay. So let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah Ois Cotton Test. The first thing that the Chofetz Chaim does is he makes a very interesting diuk. He says as follows: Mashma midivrei Abach ve'Elia Rabbah. He says we're discussing the topic here of doing bedika, of checking the tzitzis to make sure that they're in good shape. He says if you look at the Bach and you look at the Elia Rabbah, it is implied the gam b'Shabbos yesh livdak atalis, that on Shabbos, when you put on a talis, you should also check the strings of the tzitzits. V'ayin b'Siman Yud Gimel b'Bir Halachi, so he sends us over to Siman Yud Gimel to a Bir Halacha. Now the truth is, ein mekaymai kan laharich, this is not really the place to discuss this question at length. Really, we will discuss this issue in greater length, taka, over there when we arrive, Bezos Hashem Yisbarach, at Siman Yud Gimel. But just to understand what the Chofetz Chaim is referring to over here, the Chofetz Chaim in Siman Yud Gimel says it would seem that it is the minig not to check the tzitzis strings on Shabbos. And the Chofetz Chaim tries to be matzdik the minig. He says, why is it that people don't check the strings of the tzitzits on Shabbos? And he gives one possible reason. He says, on Shabbos, remember what we just said, to put tzitzits on a beged of daled kanfas is a mitzvah asay. To wear a beged of daled kanfas without tzitzis is a bittul asay, but it's not an Isser Lav. Says the Chofetz Chaim over there in Siman Yud Gimel that to be wearing a beged of daled kanfas without tzitzits on Shabbos is not really a bittul asay. Why? Because on Shabbos you're not allowed to put tzitzits on a beged. How do you put tzitzits on a beged? You have to tie knots. And those knots are kesher shel kayama. you want those knots to be permanent knots, right? Nowadays, when you go buy tzitzis or talis, they ask you if you want the glue on the knots to make sure that the knots never loosen up. So certainly those knots are intended to be a kesher shel kayama. So you can't affix tzitzits to a talis on Shabbos. Therefore, suggests the Chavetz Chaim, he says, you cannot say that it is a bittul aseh not to put tzitzits on a beged of daled kanfas on Shabbos, because on Shabbos you're not allowed to put tzitzits on a beged. So says the Chavetz Chaim, he thinks that possibly the reason people don't check the tzitzits on Shabbos is because they say, what's the purpose of checking the tzitzits? Let's say you're going to find out that the tzitzits are not proper, they're not kosher. You can't go ahead and put tzitzits on the beged because it's Shabbos, and you can't. You're being mevatel on aseh. No, you're not being mevatel on aseh. If I wear a beged of daled kanfas on Shabbos, but I'm not allowed to put tzitzits on it, that's not a bittul aseh. But, says the Chavetz Chaim, that doesn't excuse you from checking the strings on Shabbos before you make a bracha, because even if you're not being mevatel on aseh, but to make a bracha on a beged of daled kanfas that doesn't have proper tzitzits would be a bracha of HaTorah. So the Chavetz Chaim is puzzled over there in Siman Yud Gimel. Why is it that people do not check the tzitzits on Shabbos? L'chara, they should check the tzitzits on Shabbos, and we'll speak about it again in greater length in Siman Yud Gimel. But over here, in Ois Kat and Chaf, the Mishnah Berurah is just making the point that over here we're talking about the need to check tzitzits, and he's telling you should know that from the Bacham, from the Eliyah Rabbah, it seems very clear that indeed you should be checking your tzitzits on Shabbos as well. Ois Kat and Chaf Aleph, Bechutei HaTzitzis. It's important to check the strings of the tzitzis. Says the Chavetz Chaim, it's not only the strings of the tzitzis you have to check. Gam tzarich levadkon l'mayla b'mokim nekev hatalis ad hakashira. Not only do you have to be careful to check the strings of the tzitzits, you also have to be careful to check the part of the tzitzits where the strings go into the beged. Here we have my tzitzits. So this area right over here, where it loops into the beged, he says you have to check that area very, very carefully. Says the Chavetz Chaim, why is that? Desham pasal afilu benifsak chut echad. Because if one of the strings are torn at that spot, even if only one string is torn, that would render the tzitzis pasal v'ayin b'bir halacha. And he says, take a look at the Bir Halacha, Dibur Hamaskil Ya'ayin. And again, we will discuss this at greater length as well when we get up to the halachas of the strings of the tzitzis themselves and what makes them kosher and what makes them puzzle. Moving on to Ois Kat and Chaf Beis. So what did the Mechaber say? The Mechaber said that there's a need to check the strings of the tzitzis to make sure that they're kosher. Why? Because if you don't check them and it turns out that they're not kosher and you make a bracha, that would constitute a bracha of HaTorah. So, says the Chavetz Chaim, you would think, like I mentioned at the outset of the shir, that there's another reason why you have to check the tzitzis. If you don't check the tzitzis, you might end up wearing a beged of daled kanfas without proper tzitzis affixed to them. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Afal gav de balav hachi yech shash iser sheyilbash beged shal arba kanfas beli tzitzis. Why does the Mechaber stress the question of the bracha of HaTorah? L'cheret is a much more basic problem. And that is, if it's possible that the tzitzis are not kosher, it could be that you're wearing a beged of daled kanfas without tzitzis. Mikal Makayim, nevertheless, says the Chavetz Chaim, Mukmila acheskase shahaya kosher. The Chavetz Chaim says that issue we could possibly get out of. And that is, we know that in halacha, we have a concept of a chazaka. What does a chazaka say? A chazaka allows us to assume that something maintains its status quo. So says the Chavetz Chaim, the tzitzis, the talis, l'chara has a halachic chazaka that it was kosher. So l'chara, we could continue to assume that it is still kosher, unless something happened that makes us say that, oh, well, there was a change. For example, if you were walking somewhere and you know that your tzitzis got caught on a nail, and you felt something and you felt it get pulled, so now you can't easily say that there's a chazaka anymore, that the tzitzits were kosher, so they still are kosher, because something happened to cause a reyes, a weakness in the chazaka. But like this, if everything went kishura, if everything was normal, l'chera there is a halachic chazaka that allows us to assume that the tzitzits are kosher. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, therefore, rak mishum chaymer deloy sisa sheyesh al bracha levatala. So it's only because of the stringency of the iser of loy sisa, of saying the Shem Shamayim levatala, hechmiru lebadkai. It's because of that issue. It's because of the serious nature of a bracha levatala. That's why we have this idea that you have to check the tzitzits. If it was only a question of the mitzvah saseh, of having the tzitzits on a beged of daled kanfas, we wouldn't be so stringent. Why? Because we would rely on the chazaka. Ulafizeh, and in accordance with this explanation, says the Chavetz Chaim, it turns out, mi shaloivesh kama begadim shal tzitzits. Let's say somebody is wearing several different begadim of daled kanfas. He's not wearing only a talis cotton. He's wearing 4 or 5 garments that each are 4-cornered garments, and each one of them has tzitzits on them. You only have to check one of them before you make the bracha. Why? Because again, you're wearing 6 begadim that all have daled kanfas, and they all have tzitzits. The only question now is, I have to check to make sure that at least one of them is intact, so that I could make a bracha, and the bracha should not be a bracha levatala. If at least one of them is good, so I'm being yotze in the mitzvah of tzitzis, and I can make a bracha, and it's not a bracha levatala. As far as the other ones, theoretically it's possible that the tzitzis that are on them are puzzle, but I don't have to worry about that, because I could shazak on the chazaka. I could rely on the chazaka that they're intact. Kevin the bracha akas lekulam. This works because the one bracha that you're uttering goes on all of them. So as long as one of the begadim has kosher tzitzis affixed to it, the bracha is no longer a bracha levatala. Aval, however, says the Chavetz Chaim, ha'achrayim kasru, the achrayim right, titzarech livdoik kulam. That even in that scenario, where again, you're wearing several begadim, all of which have daled kanfas and all have tzitzits, even in that case, you have to check all of them, the achrayim say. Why? Because we don't rely on chazaka in a case where it's efshel avar. A chazaka is a nice halachic concept. A chazaka comes to tell us that we have a suffix. We don't know if the status quo is in place or not. Chazaka allows us to rely that the status quo remained in place. But that's only if we don't have a way of checking. If we have a way of checking, why are we relying on a chazaka? If we have a way of checking to make sure that we're not being mevatel mitzvah saseh, of putting tzitzis on a beged of daled kanfas, why are we taking the easy way out and just relying on chazaka? No, say the achrayim. You're wearing 10 begadim, each one has daled kanfas, and they all have tzitzits. You should check all of them to make sure you're not being mevatel on aseh. V'gam, and furthermore, says the Chavetz Chaim, there's another reason why you have to check everyone. Because how powerful is this chazaka really? The chazaka geruahi. This is a very weak chazaka. Because the strings of the tzitzits, through daily life, through daily activity, it is very, very common that the strings of the tzitzits rip. So how long could we say that we're going to rely on a chazaka that the status quo remained in place? That's kind of like saying that you never have to resole your shoes, because there's a chazaka. When you bought the shoes, they had a good sole. So now we'll rely on a chazaka that the soles never wear out. No, the soles of shoes wear out. Tzitzit strings rip. So you're just going to rely on chazaka forever and you're not going to check your tzitzits? So Chavetz Chaim says that's not appropriate. V'lachein, therefore, says the Chavetz Chaim, very important halacha. Tzarich livdoik b'chol yoim ba'boiker kishaloivshan. Every morning when you put on your talis, you need to be baidik the strings of your tzitzits. Now, many people are shaking their heads right now and they're saying, oh boy, I go to Shachris and I daven early and I got to get to work, and now you're adding another few minutes onto my schedule in the morning, and now I got to get up even earlier because before davening I have to check my tzitzit strings and make sure that they're intact. So first of all, I'll give you a way out. We'll see an eitzah. But right now, the important takeaway is, the Chavetz Chaim says, bedika of your tzitzis is critical. The words he uses, tzarich livdoik, b'chol yoyim b'bayker kishalayv sham. You must, tzarich, you need to check your tzitzis strings every morning before you put your tzitzis on. Now, once you check them, once you check them, af shehesiran v'hisiach daita mehem, even if you take your talis off. So before davening, you took out your talis, you checked all four corners, you checked the strings, you made sure everything is fine, you made a bracha, you put them on. Now in the middle of davening, you have to go out to the Beis HaKisei. You took off your talis. You went, you used the Beis HaKisei, then you came out, and depending on what part of davening you were in the middle of, you got into a conversation with somebody. Bottom line is, you weren't wearing your talis for a while, and you were Mesiach Das. And now you go to put your talis back on, and you got to make another bracha, because you were Mesiach Das from your talis. Do you have to check the strings again? Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. After tzarich bracha kishachayzav aloyvish, even though you're going to have to make another bracha on your talis when you go to put it on again because you were Mesiach Das, since you made the original bracha, afilu hachi ein tzarich lachzav alivdaik. But you do not have to do another bedika on the strings. Why? Debizman muat kazeh ein a rugly pasek, because you put down your talis for 15 minutes. We're not worried that during those 15 minutes the strings ripped. For that, we could rely on the chazaka. So again, what's the Chavetz Chaim saying? The Chavetz Chaim opened by saying, the Mechaber says that you have to check your tzitzis strings before you make a bracha because of the chashash of a bracha levatala. If the strings aren't intact, if the tzitzis aren't kosher, you're going to make a bracha, it's going to be a bracha levatala. Ask the Chavetz Chaim, isn't there another reason you have to check? You have to check to make sure that you're not going to chas v'shalom put on a beged of daled kanfus without proper tzitzis. Answered the Chavetz Chaim, for that's not so stringent. Because l'chayru we have a chazaka that we could rely on. The chazaka is that the talis was kosher. At some point we know it was kosher. You bought the talis that had tzitzits on it and it came with a hechsher, or you put the tzitzits on yourself and when you made them it was kosher. So now there's a cheskes kashrus on the talis. So you could rely on the chazaka that they're kosher. So the Chavetz Chaim said, that's why the Mechaber says, why do you have to check your tzitzis? Because of the chashash of bracha levatala. Bracha levatala is very, very stringent. For that, you have to check your tzitzis. For the kashrus of the tzitzis themselves, chazaka. That's how the Chavetz Chaim opened up. Then the Chavetz Chaim said, in the name of the Achrayim, he said the Achrayim don't like this. This is not such a powerful chazaka. We know that it's somewhat common for tzitzis strings to rip. Therefore, said the Chavetz Chaim, really, every morning before you put your tzitzits on, you have to check your tzitzis. You have to check your tzitzis because of the question of bracha levatala. You also have to check your tzitzits because this chazaka of the tzitzits being kosher is not such a powerful chazaka. So he says every morning you have to check your tzitzits. Then he came up with a shaila. Okay, so in the morning before you made a bracha, you checked your tzitzits. Now you made a bracha, you put on your talis. So you put on your talis cotton. Then for whatever reason, let's say you took your talis off and you had it off for 15 minutes and you were Mesiach Das. So now the halacha is when you go to put your talis on again, you have to make a new bracha. Do you have to check the tzitzits again? Says the Chavetz Chaim, no. For a zman muat, you checked your talis this morning. You checked your tzitzits. They were kosher. You took it off for 15 minutes. We're not worried that during those 15 minutes they ripped. So no, now you don't have to make another bracha. You can put your tzitzits on again. But tomorrow morning you got to check your tzitzits again. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, va'afilu ba'boker, and even in the morning, when I'm telling you that in the morning before davening you got to check your tzitzis, va'afilu ba'boker, im al yedei abediko yispatel mitfila b'tzibur, if you came late to davening and you're going to make tefillah b'tzibur by the skin of your teeth. So if you take another minute to check your tzitzit strings, you're going to miss tefillah b'tzibur. Or they called you up for an aliyah. So you have 30 seconds to put on your talis and get up to the Sefer Torah for your aliyah. In those cases, you could put on your talis without checking, because we'll rely on the chazaka. As long as you know that yesterday they were kosher. So in other words, on Monday, you checked your tzitzits, and you know that your talis was kosher. Now on Tuesday morning, you come into shul, and as soon as you come into shul, the gabbai spots you, and he says, "Oh, Yamai, Rabbi Yisrael Daiv ben Aaron Tzvi." You have 30 seconds to put your tzitzits on. Says the Chavetz Chaim, you don't have to stop now and say, "Well, everybody wait for me, I got to check my tzitzits." As long as on Monday, you checked your tzitzits, and you know on Monday, your tzitzits were kosher. If on Monday your tzitzis were kosher, today on Tuesday, in this pressing circumstance, you could rely on the chazaka. But if not for that, you got to check. Having said that, says the Chavetz Chaim, as you're walking to the bima, you should check as much as you can. How about if you got called up for an aliyah and you're not wearing your talis, you're borrowing somebody else's talis? Our minig is that when you borrow a talis for somebody else just for an aliyah or something like that, you do not make a bracha on it, because the halacha is that really a talis that's not yours, you don't have to make a bracha. You only make a bracha if you're kind of the talis. So you showed up in shul Shabbos morning and you didn't have a talis, somebody had an extra talis and he gives it to you, that we figure he's giving it to you so that it should be yours and you should be yotzei the mitzvah with it. In that case, you make a bracha. But if it's just to go up to the Torah for an aliyah, you're going to borrow the talis for a minute, you're going to give it right back, then we don't assume he's giving it to you. He's lending it to you. If he's lending it to you, it's not yours. You don't have to make a bracha. In that case, says the Chavetz Chaim, ein tzarich lebadkei klal. In that case, you don't have to check it at all. Now, I promised you that we were going to have an eitzah that you shouldn't have to check your talis every day when you come to shul before davening. What's the eitzah? The eitzah is what the Chavetz Chaim says right now. If you check your talis at the end of davening, when you're putting it away, and now you put it in your talis zekel, then you don't have to check it tomorrow morning. In other words, today, you at the end of davening, you go, you check all of your tzitzit strings, and maybe tomorrow I'll show you how to do that. You check all of your tzitzit strings, you fold up your talis, you put it in your talis zekel, and you put it away. We're not choishish that overnight, while the talis was sitting in the talis zekel, somehow mysteriously the strings ripped and the talis became puzzle. So in that case, tomorrow morning you don't have to check it. Personally, that's what I do. I check my talis every day at the end of davening. That way tomorrow morning, I don't have to worry about it. As soon as I get to shul, I can take out my talis, I can make a bracha, and I'm ready, set, go to daven. So I check my talis at the end of davening, not at the beginning of davening. Okay, so the takeaway over here from Siftes is you must check the strings of your talis every day. Why? Because if chas v'chalila they're ripped and you make a bracha, you're making a bracha levatala. Also, we want to make sure that your tzitzits are intact and you're not chas v'shalom being mevatel and asay. But for that, there is a chazaka that we do rely on for sure in pressing circumstances. But you're supposed to check your tzitzis every day. Eitz tova, you could check your tzitzis at the end of davening when you put your talis away, instead of having to check your tzitzis at the beginning of davening when you're in more of a rush. Okay, now back to Yud Daled Amud Aleph, bottom line in the Mechaber. It says the Mechaber Sif Yud. Im loivesh talis cotton ba'oid she'ein yadav nikiyos. Let's say your talis cotton is right next to your bed, and you want to make sure that you don't walk Daled Amos without tzitzis. So you wake up in the morning, you say Ma'idani, you lean over, you take your talis cotton, you put on your talis cotton, and you head off to the Beis HaKisei. But meantime, you didn't wash the Tilas Yadayim. So right now, you don't want to make a bracha. You don't have Yadayim Nikiyos. Let's remember, according to the Rosh, this is not Stam Yadayim. According to the Rosh, when you wake up in the morning, your hands are Vaday Meluchlachos. Your hands are considered to be unclean and they're pasal lebracha. So now you don't want to make a bracha. Normally, we said you make the bracha over lasi asan. You would make the bracha before you put the tzitzits on. But now you don't have clean hands, so you can't make the bracha. So says the Mechaber, Yil b'shenu b'lai bracha. So in this case, where you're forced by halacha that you cannot make a bracha now because your hands are puzzled for a bracha, so put it on without a bracha. Ugishayital yadav, and after you wash your hands, yemashmesh batzitzits, take hold, touch, and feel your tzitzits, v'yavarech alav, and make a bracha over them. Or alternatively, Kishel yilbash talis acher. There's another eitzah, and that is don't make a bracha on the talis cotton at all. When you put on your talis gadol, when you get to shul, yivarech alav, make a bracha on the talis gadol, v'yechaven liftar gamezeh, and have in mind to be pater the talis cotton. Ve'ein tzarich lemashbesh batzitzi yoshal rishain, and when you do that, you do not have to hold and feel the tzitzits of the talis cotton. So again, what did the Mechaber say over here? And the Mechaber first started with a practical problem. You wake up in the morning and you don't want to go Dalet Amos without tzitzits. So your tzitzits are right next to your bed. So you grab your tzitzits and you put them on right away. Now, we want you to make the bracha over l'asiyasan. We want you to make the bracha before you put the talis cotton on. But you can't make the bracha on the talis cotton because your hands are still unclean. Says the Mechaber, what do? Put on the talis cotton, go wash the tilas yadayim, then grab hold of your tzitzits and make the bracha. Or, alternatively, the Mechaber has another eitzah, and that is, don't make a bracha on the talis cotton at all. You put on the talis cotton, keep wearing it, get dressed, go to shul. When you get to shul, you're going to take your talis gadol, and you're going to make a bracha lehisatev patzitzis on your talis gadol. When you make that bracha of lehisatev patzitzis on the talis gadol, have in mind to be moitzi the talis cotton as well. So one bracha, the bracha that you make over the talis gadol, will cover both the talis gadol and the talis cotton that you put on when you got dressed. And if you do that, says the Mechaber, so when you make the bracha on the talis gadol, do you have to touch the tzitzits of the talis cotton? Says the Mechaber, no, not necessary. Says the Mishnah Berurah cotton chav gimel. Yamashmeish patzitzits. In the first scenario of the Mechaber, where you put on the talis cotton before Netilas Yadayim, and now you're going to make the bracha after Netilas Yadayim. In that scenario, says the Mechaber, you should hold the tzitzits of the talis cotton. Somehow, the Chavetz Chaim brings down from the Beis Yosef, somehow, by holding the tzitzits, it's a little bit as if you're putting on the talis cotton now. Even though we always paskin that a brachas ha-mitzvahs, you make it over l'asiyasan, you make the bracha before you mekayim the mitzvah. Hachashani over here, it's different. Mishum dakati gavra loy chazi. The reason over here you're going to get away with it is because you can't make a bracha on the talis cotton now, because you have unclean hands. Gavra loy chazi. You're a person that's not roi for making a bracha. If you're not roi to make a bracha, we cannot demand the bracha from you. So what will we tell you? We'll tell you make the bracha as soon as you're able. When are you able? After you wash the tilas yadayim. Ois cotton chav dalid. The Mishnah Berurah said that another eitzah is don't make a bracha on the talis cotton at all. Put on the talis cotton without a bracha. Don't make a bracha. Go to shul. When you're putting on the talis gadol, that's when you should make a bracha and make one bracha to cover the talis gadol and the talis cotton. Ois cotton chav dalid says the Mishnah Berurah v'chavan liftar v'hachi nohug bizmanenu, and the Chavetz Chaim says that is the minig in our times. Levarech al talis gadol, to make a bracha in shul over the talis gadol, or lechaven liftar b'zeh talis cotton, and to have in mind to cover the tzitzis of the talis cotton as well. And says the Chavetz Chaim, v'hachi adif tfei, and this is a much better minig, mimashe noyagin eza anoshim, this is much better than the minig that some people have, shemevarchen ala talis cotton, where they make a bracha taka on the talis cotton when they get up in the morning, v'tekif mevarchen ala talis gadol, and then very soon after that, they also make a bracha on the talis gadol. Shegarmin bracha shein etzricha, because the Chavetz Chaim says that's not a good minig, you're making a bracha shein etzricha. Why are you making a bracha, an individual bracha on the talis cotton, when you know full well that 15 minutes from now when you get to shul, you're going to make a bracha of lehisatev patzitzis on the talis gadol. You're making an unnecessary bracha. We don't want to make unnecessary brachas. That's also an inyan of Shem Shamayim Levatala. V'oid, and furthermore, says the Chavetz Chaim, there's another reason why he likes this eitzah better. He likes the eitzah of making the bracha on the talis gadol and pattering the bracha on the talis cotton. Why? Afilu im yafsik zman meruba ben a talis cotton legadol. Because, says the Chavetz Chaim, even if it's going to be an hour or 2 hours from when you put on the talis cotton until you put on the talis gadol, kama pa'amim ein ra'i levarech alav. The Chavetz Chaim says that he saw a very big problem, that very often the talis cotton that people were wearing were not proper, and they were not roy for a bracha. Why? They in pasuach rubai. Some of them, the sides were not opened. They were sewn closed. So it's not really a beged of Daled Kanfas. I do cotton me'ashir, or they're too small. It's cotton me'ashir hamavur l'kamam b'simin tezayin sif aleph. It's smaller. A lot of the talisois kitanois were much smaller than the required shear. Or it's really a beged laila. They slept with it at night. So the Hilchos Chaim says that there were many reasons why the talis cotton might not be royal bracha anyway. Therefore, the Hilchos Chaim, all things taken into consideration, the Hilchos Chaim likes much more the eitzah that don't make a bracha on the talis cotton at all. Instead, when you get to shul and you put on the talis gadol, make a bracha over the talis gadol and pater the talis cotton with the bracha on the talis cotton, on the talis gadol. Now we get to a very, very interesting sif, and a sif that causes some people a tremendous amount of consternation. Let's see what the Mechaber says. Sif Yod Aleph. Iker mitzvahs talis cotton. The Iker mitzvah of the talis cotton doesn't say anything about being yoitza, not being yoitza, but Iker mitzvah talis cotton. The main point, the thrust of the mitzvah of the talis cotton, leloiv shay al begadav, would be to wear the talis cotton on top of your clothing. So you have your shirt, the way we dress nowadays. You have the shirt. Iker mitzvah of the talis cotton, says the Mechaber, is to wear the talis cotton over the shirt in the style that we know nowadays. Many chassidim do wear their talis cotton that way. They wear the talis cotton over the shirt. Says the Chavetz Chaim, that's the Iker mitzvah of the talis cotton. The Iker mitzvah of the talis cotton is to wear it over the shirt. Why? Kedei shetamid yir'eyu, so that you should always see it. You should always see the tzitzits. The yizkar mitzvahs, and you should remember the mitzvahs. What is the mitzvah of tzitzis? Laman tizkeru v'asisem es kol mitzvah v'yisem kedoshim le'lekeichem. So says the Mechaber, Iker mitzvah of talis cotton is to wear it over your clothing. No way around it. No way around this Mechaber. The Mechaber is very clear. The Mechaber says that's the Iker mitzvah, wear the talis cotton over the shirt. Incidentally, Rav Moshe Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha, that is what he did. He wore his talis cotton over his shirt. You didn't see it that often because he was usually wearing kapata when you saw him. But in the house, when he was in his shirt sleeves, in camp, in the mountains, when he was sitting out back in a bungalow or he was sitting inside the bungalow, he wore the talis cotton over the shirt. You have the Mechaber. The Mechaber says, wear the talis cotton over the shirt. Says the Mishnah Berurah Kan Chafei al begadov. However, ubaksavim isa, the talis cotton takas begadov. It's brought down that the talis cotton should be under the clothing. The cause of a Magen Avram, the Magen Avram writes, Dal kol panim tsar sheyu atzitzitz mi bachutz. The Mishnah Berurah brings down for the Magen Avram that at least the tzitzits should be bachutz. Now everybody has their picture in their mind right now. That what does that mean? That means even if you're going to wear the tzitzits under your clothing, so aka in our mode of dress, even though you're going to wear the talis cotton under your shirt, but at least the tzitzits should be out. So we're thinking now Lakewood, we're thinking yeshivas all over the world, black hat yeshiva guys, we're thinking tzitzits under the shirt, tzitzits out. That's what we're thinking. The Mishnah Berurah just said. Ubaksavim isa the talis cotton takas begadov. The cost of a Magen Avram they'll call panim tzar shivat tzitzits mibachutz. At least the tzitzits should be outside. That's not what the Magen Avram says. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. V'loi ki inach shetoichven oisan ba'aknafos. Not like some people that stick the strings of the tzitzits in to the corners of the beged of the talis cotton. You know how we have the talis cotton has a piece of cloth, a square piece of cloth sewn on the corner? So apparently there was some people where that piece was sewn on and it was like a pocket. Maybe the top seam was opened. So they would take the tzitzits and tuck them in. Says the Magen Avram, that you are not allowed to do. And the Magen Avram bases that on the Gemara in Menachos. A Gemara in Menachos. I have a Menachos right here. Gemara in Menachos, Mem Aleph, Amid Beis. Mem Aleph. Gemara Menachos, Mem Aleph, Amid Beis, where the Gemara says, Ein tzitzits elo yoytze. They're not considered tzitzits unless they're yoytze, unless the strings of the tzitzits go out. Rashi says, Toloi v'yoytze min haknaf mashu. They have to be hanging and they have to be outside of the corner of the beged. So the Magen Avram holds that it's an ikar chisaron in tzitzits. If the way you put the tzitzits on the beged is you put the tzitzits on the beged and you tuck them into a corner of the beged, then you're pashut not yoytze in the midst of tzitzits. It's not just an inyan of laman tizkeru v'asisem es kol mitzvah. No, you're not yoytze tzitzits. By attaching tzitzits to the beged and tucking them into a knaf, you're not yoytze. Ain't tzitzits ela yoytze. He learns from the Gemara in Menachos. So the Magen Avram really, I think, has a technical problem. The Magen Avram is saying that if you're going to take the tzitzits and you're going to stick the tzitzits in the knaf of the beged, you're not yoytze tzitzits. So I'm suggesting that you read the Mishnah Berurah like this. The Mishnah Berurah is saying like this. The Mechaber said that the ikar mitzvah of tzitzits is that the tzitzit should be outside over your begadim. That means like chassidim nowadays. Wear the beged outside over your clothing with the tzitzits hanging off of the beged. So they'll also be outside. The Mechaber says that's the ikar way to wear tzitzits. That's the proper way to wear tzitzits. Why? Because you're supposed to see them. Kidei shetamid yireyu v'yizkar. Comes along the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut l'chafei. He says, first of all, you should know it's brought down in the Ksavim that the tal's cotton should be under the begadim. That's number one. The cause of a Magen Avram, tal kol panim tzar shiyu atzitzis b'bachutz. If you're gonna wear the tal's cotton under your clothing, like it says in the Ksavim, but you should know that the tzitzits, even if the tzitzit strings are under your clothing, they should not be tucked into the corner of the beged, because then you're not yoytze. But if you're wearing your talis cotton under your clothing, and the tzitzits are also under the clothing, but they're hanging off of the beged, that's okay. The Magen Avram has no problem with that. So the Magen Avram is not saying, yes, you could wear the beged of the talis cotton under your shirt, but the strings of the talis cotton should be outside of your pants. That's not what the Magen Avram is saying. The Magen Avram is discussing something else. The Mechaber said the best thing is that the whole beged and the tzitzits and everything should be outside. In the Ksavim, it said you should wear the talis cotton inside, under your clothing. Says the Magen Avram, fine, you could wear your talis cotton under your clothing. The beged, the tzitzits, everything. You could wear it under your clothing. But the strings of the beged have to be hanging off of the beged, not tucked into the corners of the beged. Because if you tuck them into the corners of the beged, you're not yoytze. Why? Because ain't tzitzits ela yoytze. Gemara Menachos Daf Mem Aleph Amud Beis. Okay. Continues the Mechaber. Ach, ha'anashim sheholchim beino akum yoytzin bazeh. People who are amongst goyim, they could be yoytze with their tzitzis totally hidden. But b'shas bracha, the tzitzis should be out at least for arba amos. Okay. The Mechaber said, why is it the best thing that the tzitzit should be out? Because you should see them. Kemadik siv, like the pasuk says, now the Chafetz Chaim, not the Magen Avram, not the Mechaber, the Chafetz Chaim. I'm not Chas v'Shalom being called the Chafetz Chaim. It's the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim does denigrate the minig of keeping the tzitzis tucked into the pants. Says the Chafetz Chaim. People who tuck the tzitzis into their pants. Says the Chafetz Chaim, not only are they hiding their eyes from what the pasuk says, that you should see the tzitzis uzachartem, loy die that they're not being yoitze that concept. Oid mevazen heinis mitzvah Hashem yisparach. Chofetz Chaim says that by tucking the tzitzis into your pants, you're being mevazen the mitzvah of tzitzis. Why? I think the reason why is because, inside your pants is not considered a makom chashuv. I mean, you're tucking your tzitzis into a makom mechusa, right? A place that's not always so clean, a makom of zeya, and possibly even worse things. That's where you put your tzitzis. And the Chofetz Chaim says that asidin hein litenas hadin. And when he talks about people who go amongst goyim, for that, you don't have to stick the tzitzits into your pants. You could put them into the corner of the beged, which the Magen Avram didn't like, right? The Magen Avram didn't like that idea. The Magen Avram said, no. If you stick the tzitzits into the corner of the beged, you might not be yoytze the mitzvah. But at the end of his Katan Chafei, the Chofetz Chaim said, Af ha'anoshim sheholchem bein ha'akum yoytzen bazeh. The Magen Avram says that, no, I don't know if the Magen Avram. The Chofetz Chaim says, the Magen Avram doesn't like sticking them into the knaf, but Shasat Chak, your holchem bein ha'nochrim, you have no choice. You could do it in your yoytze. So says the Chofetz Chaim over here, you're going to take your tzitzis and stick them in your pants? Says the Chofetz Chaim, no. That's a bizayon. That's being mevazah the mitzvah. Better do what the Magen Avram does not like and take the tzitzits and put them into the corner of the beged. If you had a gift from an earthly king, that's the king's name on it, you would show it off. The front two tzitzits, it's brought down. When you look at the front two tzitzits, what do you see? You see 10 knots and 16 strings. 10 knots and 16 strings is 26. 26 is the gematria of the Shem Havaya. So you have a gift from the Melech Malchei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? It has his name on it. 26. Gematria Havaya. You go ahead, you stick it in your pants. You should show it off. And furthermore, Chazal tell us, somebody who's extra careful with the mitzvah of tzitzis, he'll be merit to see the shechina. The Yidden that will be around when Mashiach comes, they'll be extra careful with the mitzvah of tzitzis. The goyim will come and they'll grab onto the corners of the begadim of the Yidden. You'll have 2,800 avadim. What's 2,800 avadim, by the way? So it's brought down. We know that there are shivim umais. There are 70 nations. So it's brought down that when Mashiach comes, what's the cheshbon? 10 people from each one of the shivim umais, so that's 700 people, 700 Einam Yehudim, will grab on to each one of the corners of your tzitzis. So 700 times 4 is 2,800. So if you're extra nizar in the mitzvah of tzitzis, you'll be zoicha to 2,800 avodim. So to wrap this up, this question of wearing the tzitzis in, wearing the tzitzis out, the Mechaber says that the Iker mitzvah of the talis cotton is to wear talis cotton over your clothing. The Mechaber is talking about wearing the entire talis cotton over your clothing. That's the Iker mitzvah. Why? Because they should tamid yireyu v'yiskar mitzvahs. So you should always see the talis cotton. You should always be cognizant of the talis cotton and the tzitzis. L'man tizkaru v'asisem as kol mitzvosai v'yisem kedoshim le'elokeichem. So says the Mechaber. Says the Chofetz Chaim, he brings down from the Ksuvim that the talis cotton should be under. Brings down from the Magen Avram, there's something that the Magen Avram really didn't like based on a technicality in Hilchos Tzitzis. And that is the minig of taking the strings of the tzitzis and tucking them in to the corners of the beged. That he didn't like because of the Gemara in Menachos Daf Mem Aleph Amud Beis, where it says ein tzitzis ela yoytze. The tzitzis have to hang off of the beged. They can't be tucked into the corner of the beged. So the Magen Avram did not like that. Says the Chavetz Chaim does not like the minig of taking the tzitzis and sticking them into the pants, because he says that is bevuzah. If you don't want to wear your tzitzis out for everyone to see, let's say you're holchem ben anachrim, and that's not the way we dress, we keep the talis cotton under the clothing, so fine. So then figure out something to do with the tzitzis that's not a bizayon. What could you do? Do what the Magen Avram doesn't like. Put them into the confines. Put them into the corners. Okay, very good. We'll stop over here. A little bit short today of the page, but we're going to stop at Sif Yud Beis. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discuss of limud HaTorah should be begging against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe Shem should send Yeshua's for first Parnasah and Shidduchim to all those in need. The Rebbe Shem should send a nechama to Klal Yisrael and the loss of Hagoyin, Arav, Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal, Zechitzal V'Kodesh L'Vracha. The Klal Yisrael brought a tremendous carbon over the last few days. We brought a tremendous carbon on Purim in Eretz Yisrael. We brought a carbon of Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal. It should be a kapara for Klal Yisrael. Who knows what tragedies and who knows what tsaras Klal Yisrael has been saved from the carbon that the Rebbe Shalom took Reb Chaim from us. It brings a tremendous kapara. On the one hand, it's a tremendous loss, a tremendous tragedy, an incalculable loss to Klal Yisrael. But at the same time, hopefully it also brought kapara to Klal Yisrael. Who knows how many gzeros rois chas v'chalila Klal Yisrael will be saved from. But now we have to step up to the plate. And not sure it's shaykh to say to fill the void of Reb Chaim Kanievsky. Certainly those who are Yoshev al Sefer, those who are in Dalan Amos Shal Halacha, this is what the Rishiva Zatzal taught us all the time, that everybody who's in the Beis Medrash has a chiyuv to learn to become a gadol. It's not a chiyuv to learn, spend time learning. It's a chiyuv to strive to become a gadol. That's the chiyuv that we carry. That's the chiyuv that we have. And if there's a void in our dar, we have to try to fill that void. The Rebbe Shem should bring in the Chama to Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe Shem should end all of the tsaras of Klal Yisrael. We should be zeicher to the Geula Shleima, to Yeshua's and the Chamas. The Rebbe Shem should have Rachmanos on Klal Yisrael, but B'chol Makom Shehem. Be well.